Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Good morning, beautiful humans. Thaís Sky here. Okay, so last week I had Julie on the podcast and I received so much wonderful feedback about how many of you enjoyed that episode. Thank you so much for sharing the podcast, for reaching out to me and letting me know how much it resonates. I mean, I really, really love hearing from all of you. It really means the world. This podcast is a small indie project. I essentially do everything, and I'm sitting here in my bedroom right now recording this episode the day before it goes live. I do most of the editing. I mean, this is pretty much a one-woman's job here. And so hearing from all of you that this episode has been, or this podcast has been supportive for you, it has helped you, or it has made you think about things a certain way, or it was just inspiring, really means the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Today, I want to talk about decision making. Now, this isn't going to encompass all of my thoughts on decision making, but I want to talk about one specific type of decision making and how I have been navigating it. And maybe that will support you if you are on the precipice of making a large decision like I am. I am at a point right now where I feel like there is a fork in the road and I am being asked to pick which fork I want to take, which are going to take me on very different journeys. If I take the right path, it's going to lead me down a very dramatically different road than if I take the left path. So it's been making me think a lot about, it's making me question a lot of things. It's making me really wonder and reground myself in my values of how did I get myself in this position? Not in like how did I get myself here? I'm so bad, but just like what factors led me here, and what factors do I want to evaluate, and what factors do I want to reevaluate, and how do I want to make this decision? And it got to the point where I was trying to guess where each path would take me years down the road. So what would it be like if I take this path, the right path on the right? Where would that end? Where would I end up in 10 years if I take that path? Where would I end up if I take the left path in 10 years? And I was really spiraling in that. Like if I could just figure out where each path would take me, then I would be able to make this decision, because I could tell you, I don't want to end up there in 10 years. And so I'm not going to take this path. But this is not the way to go. Personally, I believe it's not the most helpful way to go for many reasons. One, we don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. Just because you're making this big decision right now doesn't mean you know where this decision is going to lead you 10 years down the road. There have been plenty of times in my life I've made a big decision that completely changed the trajectory of my life. And then a few months down the road or a year down the road, I made another decision that I would have never anticipated a year before. We have so little capacity to anticipate what's going to happen. Did anyone really guess that a pandemic was going to happen? I mean, maybe we could argue that scientists have been telling us that major diseases are going to become an issue, but to be frank, most of us could never fathom that a pandemic was going to happen and try to plan our lives 10 years back to make sure that we were settled for this pandemic, right? That just doesn't happen. And so trying to think about how this decision is going to impact you way down the road, for some of you may be helpful. If it is, keep going. For me, I found like it was keeping me stuck. It was keeping me stuck in believing that there's a right way and the wrong way, and that the future is set depending on whether I make the decision the right way or the wrong way. And it can get very tantalizing to believe that there's a right and a wrong way to live our lives. This idea that there are right things to do, there are wrong things to do, that doing this is right, doing this is wrong. If you do this, you're right. If you do this, you're wrong. kind of moralism of believing these things is a way that we stay stuck in a binary way of thinking, where there's a good and there's a bad. And binary ways of thinking, it's very, what's the best word that I want to use for it? It's a primitive type of thinking. It's a childlike type of thinking that removes the spaciousness that actually exists, where there's the good and the bad and everything in the middle. That there actually is no right or wrong answer. There is no right or wrong way. No matter what you decide, you can't go wrong, because there is no such thing. There is literally no such thing as right or wrong. There just isn't. There's no way you can fuck this up. I promise you, friend, there is no way that you can fuck up your life. There is no one decision that you can possibly make that's going to completely throw away your life, unless we're talking about suicidality, right? Most of our decisions, there's going to be another decision after that. That's the fallacy as well that I found myself getting caught in. I just have to make this decision, this fork in the road, and then it's like dominoes falling. Everything else is just going to fall into place for the next 10 years. But that's not how this works, my love. You make one decision, and then the next day, you have to make that decision again. And what I mean by that is that at any given moment, you can change your mind. At any given moment, you can make a different decision. It's very rare that the decision is this or that. The decisions tend to be this and that. You make this decision, and then the next day you wake up and you have to make another one and another one and another one. And so while it feels for me like there's a fork in the road and it's either this two drastic different options, the truth of the matter is no matter what I pick, the very next day I'm going to have to pick it again, or I get to make a different decision the next day. And the next day, and the next day after that. Life is just a series of decisions. And so instead of thinking about it as like a right way or wrong way, we can think about it, what's just the next step? I use the word next right step, but I use the word right there to be different than right or wrong, as in it's good or bad. I use right in the next right step as just the next step that's in integrity with my values, integrity with who I am in the world. It brings me peace when I think about this decision, not because I'm not in turmoil about whether or not I should be making this decision, but just that it feels like it's in alignment with who I want to be, who I am now, what I want my life to be, what my life is now, etc. So I use the word right in that context to mean a slightly different definition of right. You get to use whatever words obviously feels good for you. It's just helpful for me to, especially at times when I think that everything lies between two decisions, to think I just have to do the next right thing for me, the next thing that is in alignment with my values. And then the next day, the next month, I will be asked to make another decision that will again invite me to think about my values, what I want, what feels right for me. That's it. That's pretty much what life is, right? You're just making the next right decision and then the next right one and then the next right one. And if you do that, your life is going to move in a direction that you can't anticipate, and it's going to be wonderful. But let's say you don't do that. Let's say you make a decision and it doesn't feel like the right one, but it feels like the one you have to make. Guess what? Nothing bad's going to happen either. The next day, you'll have another decision to make. You can always change your mind. You can always think about it again. You can always find ways to navigate your life in a way that is suitable for you. There is no being trapped. There is no believing that there's no options, no choices. There are always options. There are always choices. And when we can't see it, do what I do. I pray. When I can't see the options, I pray. I ask the higher powers, universe, God, whatever, it doesn't even matter to me. I just say, I can't see another possibility. Help me see another possibility. Because when we're in a fork in a road and we think the things are either this extreme to the left or this extreme to the right, odds are there's probably a lot of gray between those two options that you could choose instead. A lot of different ways that you can think about the decision. There are so many infinite possibilities. We don't have to get stuck in believing that everything is either this or that. There is just this decision and then the next one after that and the next one after that. And what we're often so typically afraid of when we make decisions, right? When we think about making the wrong move, what we're really afraid of is then we're going to be left with consequences of our actions. We're going to be left with decisions that we regret. We take a job, we moved to a new city, we start that job and realize we hate that job. And now we're stuck and we made all this for nothing. But, we have to keep in mind that we'll never know all the information we need to know in order to make a decision. You won't know if you'll like the job or not. You just won't know. There's no way of knowing. You're going to have to just go and see. You can ask questions. You can trust your gut. You can reach out to people. But ultimately, it's going to require a little bit of a leap of faith. Let's say you take a leap of faith and you go and you hate it and all of your worst nightmare comes true. You hate the job, you hate the city, you feel lonely, nothing is working. You give it a shot, you give it 6 months, you give it a year, and you're still miserable. Guess what? Now you can make another decision. You can choose to move back. You can choose to move to a different city completely. You can choose to change careers. Maybe hating this job force you to see that actually you don't like this career path. And now is your opportunity to change careers. Maybe you learn what it is that you love about this city and what it is that you don't. And you find a city that has more of the qualities that you do and more of the qualities and less of the qualities that you don't. Right? All of this is a great big adventure of you finding your way. This is what life is all about. You're finding your way. You're just making decisions, dealing with the consequences of them, trusting that you can deal with the consequences of them, and then moving to the next decision. I like to think as much as I've made mistakes in the past, as much as I've made big decisions that I regret, I like to think that I have my own back. I really like to trust that no matter what happens, I'm going to be able to handle it because I have my own back. If there's anyone I will gamble on, is there anyone I will bet on? It's me. I got this. That's not to say that I'll always make the decision that I end up enjoying. We don't know oftentimes if we will or we won't. So we don't have to stay on the hook of I should have known better. I should have known that this job wasn't going to be right for me. That's not helpful. What is helpful is to just think about, okay, now what? What can I learn from this? Maybe sometimes there's lessons and things. I don't think we always have to have lessons and things, but sometimes it's helpful to think about what did this job offer me that I now know that I didn't know before? And how can I use that information to guide me in my next decision? And then the next one after that, and then the next one after that. Now, a question that I often get is, I want to break my pattern. I have a pattern of making, let's say, impulsive decisions. I don't want this decision to be impulsive. What do I do? Do I just not make this decision? Do I not make this move? And, I think it's really helpful when we're talking about patterns the first thing I always invite people who talk to me about patterns to do is get clear on what the pattern is and the feelings that underline the pattern. The more you can get familiar with the pattern, the more you can understand it and know how to break it, to know the places within the pattern that you can infuse more space. Spaciousness breaks patterns. The more we can give ourselves space to be with the different aspects of what is happening without unconsciously recreating the same thing over and over and over again, we start to break the pattern. It's kind of like quantum physics. I can't even imagine that I'm saying this. I know nothing about quantum physics, but I do know that there's this idea, or maybe it's a truth, I don't know, a theory, that behavior of certain atoms change when it is being observed. Please don't come after me if I got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's something along this in the quantum physics, that simply by the nature of being observed, those atoms, those things change. That's the same that can be said about patterns. simply by asking yourself, am I perpetuating a same pattern? Simply by getting curious about your patterns, simply by slowing it down and asking yourself a little bit of deeper questions before you make a decision, you are already in the process of breaking your pattern. That's the good news. We often think of breaking patterns as becoming a totally different person, but that's not often what it looks like. What it often looks like is making small tweaks whenever we notice that the pattern is running. Whenever we notice that we may be falling into a pattern, we sit with the tension. We sit with it. We just give ourselves space to feel things through. And as we do that, we are breaking the pattern. Ultimately, it doesn't matter really what decision you make when it comes to breaking patterns. Breaking patterns isn't about the decision in and of itself, but rather our relationship with the decision, our relationship to ourselves before, during, and after a decision. That is usually the pattern that we're wanting to break. Let's say we want to break the pattern of being less impulsive. I'm going to speak for myself and say that I can sometimes be an impulsive decision maker. And the way I've made decisions in the past, especially large ones, is by going back and forth and then going, fuck it, let's just do it, and making the big decision. Now, I've done this in the past for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons why sometimes we can be a little bit impulsive in our decision making is because, one, being in the unknown of making a decision, being in the place where you haven't made a decision yet can be really difficult. And two, by saying fuck it and making the decision, we immediately alleviate the tension of not having made a decision. And that tension can be really difficult for people to sit with. And so that's certainly true for me. And that's where I've made really impulsive decisions that now I look back on and I'm like, I wish I didn't make that, or I wish I could have changed that, or I wish I could have thought that through a little bit more. And so what I'm playing with is to give myself more space to sit and feel out the different possibilities, to really be with what it would mean to make this decision, and to increase my tolerance, my capacity to be with the uncertainty of not making a decision. Now, of course, it's not always possible because we are under a deadline, or we feel like we have to make a decision by a certain time in order to get the opportunity or whatever it is. And so you get to figure out how this applies and how this works for you. But oftentimes, sense of urgency is an internal experience, not always so much an external experience. What I mean by that is that, of course, there are imposed deadlines from us coming at us at all different directions. But most of the time, for most decisions, it's usually more self-generated. We impose certain deadlines on ourselves, and we do this in a variety of different ways. Again, I think we do this because it's very hard to stay with the tension of not knowing what we're going to do. Now, some of you may not be impulsive decision makers. Some of you may be the ones who sit on a decision for a long period of time and really don't make decisions. That may be your pattern, where you sit on something for a long time. And for that, I just want to offer the potential that actually what you're doing isn't sitting on a decision, but actually trying to avoid the responsibility that comes when you make a decision and now have to deal with the consequences of your decision. Oftentimes when we really avoid making a decision for way too long, it's not that we're in the process of being in relationship with the decision and really thinking about it and feeling it through. We're often in denial that we have to make a decision. We often push that decision down into the back of our minds. We try to imagine that we don't have a decision until, boom, it slaps us in the face. And then we either make the decision or it's too late, right? All of that, the pushing it down, the ignoring it, the pretending you don't see it, that is a decision. You are making a decision, and then you are going to have to deal with the consequences of that decision. So there is nowhere you can go. The decisions are not there. You are making decisions constantly, consciously or unconsciously. It is happening. So for those of you who spend a lot of time not making decisions, who are indecisive, there's usually something there about what it would mean for you to really take ownership of your desires and your what you want in the world. There's probably something there for you to investigate about what it means to not trust that you can handle whatever decision you make. You can handle whatever decision you make. I believe that we can handle whatever decision we make. If you don't believe that, fine. I'll just say it for myself. I trust that I can handle whatever decision I make, and that I can always then make another decision. Maybe that decision changes my relationship with that thing. Maybe that decision changes the thing. But I always would rather prioritize my capacity to navigate life than to just sit there and hope that life happens to me and hope that whatever happens is what I want it to happen. Give yourself space. Think about decisions. Feel it through. Now, when I say feel it through, I mean to let yourself feel out the different possibilities. We live in a culture that really prioritizes making logical decisions, right? Pros and cons lists. And that's fine. There's, of course, power in pros and cons lists. I'm always a fan of a list. Pros and cons can be really helpful to think about all of the different options when we're making a decision. Love that. Love the pros and cons list. Totally good. But it's not the only way to make decisions, or certainly not the only tool in your tool belt for making decisions. So there's the logic, but then there's also the emotional. And we have to understand that too, because most of the decisions that we make are actually coming from our emotional space. There's fantasies about what we want the decision to be. There's ideas of what we hope will happen if we make a decision. And all of that is not based on logic. All of that is based on emotions and expectations and desires. And so, since decisions are being made out of that place anyway, let's really own it. Instead of pushing it down into the unconscious, let's really vocalize it. Let's really talk about what the fantasies are. Let's really talk about what you imagine, you hope that things will happen once you make this decision. Let's really feel out every possibility. Let's feel out the tension in these things. Really give yourself permission to feel it through. When you feel it through, when you feel the tension, you'll just notice that the quality of the way you're making this decision changes, the possibilities change, and whatever decision you ultimately make, you'll figure it out. The decision ultimately doesn't matter. We're afraid when we are trying to break our patterns or try to break our cycles. We think that, it means we can't make large decisions because large decisions tend to be very impulsive. Well, I would argue that it's not the decision itself that's impulsive. It's the ability to sit with the decision before you make it that's impulsive. Making big decisions is just a part of life. We have to make big decisions and small decisions. Some people have more tolerance for making bigger decisions more often. Some people have less tolerance and likes to make smaller decisions or not see a lot of change in their lives, let's say like moving changes, that type of thing. None of that is better or worse. It's just what is. We all have to really sit with how much risk we're willing to take in, how much ups and downs we're willing to accept in our lives, and then just go accordingly, knowing that at any given moment you can change your mind, and the mind's changing is another decision, and also requires some thought, also requires you to feel it through. Yeah. So when it comes to, I wonder if you all can hear the birds in the background. The birds have been singing really loudly lately, and it's really wonderful. So here I am on the precipice of making a big decision. The way I've navigated it is by first removing the need to know what's going to happen 10 years down the road if I make either decision. I won't know. It's not up to me to know right now. So it's really about what feels right now, given everything in my life. Usually when I make big decisions, I clarify my values. I spend time really thinking about what is it that I want. This particular decision will really just impact 1 year of my life, which obviously has an effect of changing every other year of my life, one could argue, but it's really about what I want to do in 2022. And so it's been important for me to really think about, what is it that I want for my year? What is it that I'm feeling called for? What is it that my body wants? What is it that I have craved and desired and now is able to be manifested in my year? So I think about my values. I really think about who this decision will impact. I think it's important to be thinking about that, especially if we're in a relationship. Oftentimes our decisions impact those around us. So it's just helpful to think, I'm not saying make the decision based on what they will think. I'm saying think about the impact that it will have and make sure that that feels okay with you. If you move across the country, for example, you may impact the relationship you have with your parents. And it's just one aspect of the decision-making process of like, if you're moving away from home, are you going to, how is that going to settle for you? If one of your value systems is to be close to family, well, then making this decision of moving across the country may not fulfill that value. Are you okay with that? Or does this decision need to be examined deeper? I always give myself a little bit more time than I think I need to really think about it and feel it through. Think about it means to really think about it. It means to really explore the different facets of it. I'm not saying think about it and then suppress it and push it down. I'm talking about really giving myself some earnest time to imagine what this decision would mean and play with it and explore it in my mind. Oftentimes, I think we consider ourselves overthinkers, whatever that means, as if there's some line where we go from being a normal thinker to now overthinking. I don't know what that means. I think our brains are incredible machines and they're made to think. That's just part of being human, to think about things, right? So I think when we say the words overthinker, what we're really saying is my anxiety takes over and I start to spiral. I start to spiral in my thoughts and none of it feels helpful or productive. Now that's real. That's where I was when I was thinking about where will this decision lead me and really trying to think about that. That wasn't helpful. So when I say think it through, I'm really encouraging us to be as much in the present as possible, to be present with our bodies, to be present with our feelings, to be present with our thoughts, to think about this decision, not in a what will happen, but what do I want to happen? Not from a place of limitations, from a place of expansion, to play with the fear, to play with the resentment, to play with the questioning of the values. Like just give yourself that space. And it can be helpful to have a friend. It can be helpful to talk to your coach or therapist or a healer or teacher or whoever, your mentor, whoever you've got in your life as your support system, your family, your parents. I mean, whoever you know will be able to kind of help you think about it and think about the different possibilities, and also notice where things get tense, right? Notice where by thinking about something you start getting crunchy inside. That's really important information and helpful to know. What I invite you not to do is talk about your decisions with people whose life, whose values, whose desires and beliefs don't align with yours. That's none of your business, right? Like what they think about your decisions is none of your business. Because if they're not living the life that you want, or they're not someone that you respect, or their values aren't aligned with yours, or if they're just someone who has no skin in the game, right? Who's not doing what you're doing, then they don't really get the right to help you make this decision. So don't go to them. Way too often we're asking people who have no capacity, no way of helping us make this decision. We're asking for them for help, and then we're surprised when we don't get the answer we want, right? And then we feel like devalued, or we feel like we gotta question everything that we do. You want to be really, really thoughtful about who you're asking how to live your life from. You have to be really careful. Yeah? Okay, I think that that's it for this episode. I hope that this is supportive for you. You know, most of the times, big decisions aren't really that big in the grand scheme of things. They're just another decision. So take the pressure off. Take off this idea that you have to know all of the results. I trust you. I trust that you're going to be able to navigate this. Your life is yours for the taking. It is a wonderful, beautiful human experience of making mistakes, figuring it out, and getting back up again. There is no right or wrong way to live your life. So please give yourself permission to trust that you can handle whatever decision you make. Yeah? You've got this. You don't have to know it all. You just have to be ready to explore the next step. However big, however small that step is, it's just another step. And then another one after that. Your life is a beautiful masterpiece. I actually shared this on Instagram from 3 years ago. So 3 years ago I wrote this, and it really resonated with me when I saw it in my memories, and I want to leave it as a final note here. I had a session with a therapist yesterday, and I was sharing with her how I sometimes feel like on some level I'm waiting for a big miracle that would take away all of my problems. She looked at me right in the eyes and she responded with, "Thaís, you are the miracle." That shit spoke to my soul, and maybe on this exquisitely normal day, you need to hear that too. You are the miracle, sweet one. You are the miracle.